Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Again, my name is Alex. I'm going to be hanging out with you for a little bit here today. And for those of you who have just joined us in the last minute or so, if you were able to hear my voice as well as see my screen, you should be able to see my keynote here. Then just do me a favor and at some point just type in OK or sounds good in the question field of your GoToWebinar control panel. That will tell me that everything is working. Great. Good. It seems like everything is working. Now, as a quick disclaimer, we have been having some kind of intermittent connectivity issues here at our office for our internet. So if for some reason things cut out or I don't know, get a little shaky or something, then feel free to type into the question field. I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on things. But yeah, if you miss a portion, then we'll have to figure it out. But anyways, just wanted to disclaim that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So here's the keynote. Let's make this full screen. Play. Alrighty, well, welcome again to today's webinar. My name is Alex. I have had a number of titles here at Aplos, but currently I'm kind of one of the customer success managers. I've taken all kinds of forms from doing support to doing services to doing product management. I've been here, this is my 7th year with Aplos, so it's kind of changed quite a bit. So today we're going to be going over a webinar that is solutions for the modern nonprofit and church, kind of looking ahead to the new year and making sure that you guys are getting off to a good start with a new calendar year, potentially a new fiscal year. I want to make sure that we kind of throw some points out there that can help you kind of get organized and maybe point out some things that might be helpful as looking forward to 2018. A couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions now or as we go through or at the end, type them into that question field. I'm going to do my best to answer everything at the end today. We will also answer questions as we go, but mainly at the end of the webinar. There are a couple of polls that we're going to launch here throughout the webinar, so keep an eye out for those. And then we are recording this, so if you missed a portion, if you want to watch it later, if you want to share it, we will also send you a copy of the presentation and a recording by email after the event. So today we're going to go over kind of a brief intro, and then we're going to do an overview of fund accounting. We're going to look at how QuickBooks does a couple of different methods to track funds and how they kind of compensate for fund accounting. Then we're going to look at how Aplos does it, and then we'll go through some questions. All right. So that's me. There's my little baby face picture there from a while ago. It's still got head of services on there. So yeah, I've taken a number of roles here. Mainly I'm kind of someone that helps do most of the training and customer support. And you know, if you've been around Aplos for a little while, you've probably heard my voice in another webinar or talked to me at some point. So been around. And Aplos, for those of you who don't know who we are an online software program that is dedicated to providing software solutions for nonprofits and churches. It's kind of a mouthful, but really what we're trying to do is create kind of a one-stop shop for all of the different software that people need for their organization. So accounting, donor tracking, e-file, member management, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to kind of build that one solution there. And right now this looks like we have kind of two primary products. We've got fund accounting and we've got donor management. And with that comes a lot of other features. So accounts payable, accounts receivable, financial reporting, projects, departments, budgeting, fixed assets, customer relation management, donation receipts, all that kind of stuff is provided through our solution. So let's get into kind of the main content for today. So really what we're talking about here is that as we look forward to the new calendar year and potentially, again, a new fiscal year, a lot of churches and nonprofits are currently using a system that's just not built for what you need. So looking at a system that does do what you need is very important. And so most nonprofits and churches kind of fall within this realm of fund accounting. And really what that means is GASB, which is Governmental Accounting Standards Board, kind of the standard setting organization that creates accounting policies for fund type organizations, defines a fund as a fiscal and accounting entity with a self-balancing set of accounts recording cash and other financial resources together with related liabilities and residual equities or balances and changes therein which are segregated for the purpose of carrying on specific activities or attaining certain objectives in accordance with special regulations, restrictions, or limitations. GASB is not known for their poetic writing, but really what that means is a nonprofit or a church or a governmental entity, anything that uses fund accounting. A fund is something that you are separating out within your organization, and it's kind of its own unique thing that has its own self-balancing set of accounts, which means it's got its own cash, it's got its own debt, income, expense, residual equities, meaning it's got a carry-on balance. It's got its own, accounts payable. So it's not just income and expense, but it's also debt. Basically it's like its own little mini organization within your larger total. And all of those things kind of need to be segregated if needed, so you can run specific reports on a fund. But you also need to see how they are then a part of your total, so your organization-wide statements as well. And that's what fund accounting allows you to do, is track all of those things as a self-balancing set of accounts and provide balances and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we specialize in. That's what GASB says is important. Let me get to the thing here. So with all that kind of in mind, there are certain requirements or things you're going to want to look for in a nonprofit financial software. The first of which is the ability to quickly find the information that you need. We've been around for about 10 years now, and we've found that nonprofits and churches are typically run by people that are not CPAs, not accountants, not people that even like dealing with numbers. They're typically people that have passion. You have some sort of vision in mind. You have some sort of calling that you want to pursue, and so you do it. You go out, you start it. You start talking to people, you network, you're relational type people. You might have someone that comes alongside and can manage this kind of stuff, but maybe they did, accounting course 20 years ago and they manage some books, but nonprofits differ a little bit, so it's a little bit weird. So with all that kind of oddity, you end up kind of implementing a system that might not be as easy to use as you would like, right? So the ability to kind of quickly find information is sometimes a hassle in that kind of situation, where either the people handling it don't know how to ask the question in order to get the data that they need, or they don't know how to put it in, so that way the system just kind of gives it to you automatically. So ability to quickly find information that you need. The second, to see how many people have given to a particular fund. So with these new kind of changes that nonprofits need to adhere to in 2018 and forward, there's no longer unrestricted, temporarily restricted, and permanently restricted net assets. Now it's just net assets with donor restrictions or without. So in those two categories, you need to be able to quickly and accurately see how much money do we have, how much have we gotten that is kind of undesignated, and then how much have people designated to this specific thing, and how much of it have we spent, how much is left over, are we stewarding that correctly, are we spending that money wisely, that kind of stuff. Number three is see how many people have given in a certain time frame. So this kind of falls back to 2 and 1, where you need to be able to quickly find the information about a fund and donations, but also, hey, you people, did you give within this period of time? What was it for? What project did it go to? What fund did it go to? So that way I can get you a contribution statement that's accurate. And then the fourth one here, view how much you've received and spent on a fundraiser. And a fundraiser is just kind of a plug. Really, what that means is any sort of project or function or activity or department or fund, any sort of like cost or profit center that you guys have that you need to track, you need to be able to get there pretty quickly. So why use fund accounting? So there are a number of accounting products out there, Intuit and QuickBooks being kind of synonymous with bookkeeping or accounting software. So why use something that is specific to fund accounting? Here's a very basic example. Let's say you have a checking account, and in that checking account, you have $3,000. You then get a grant, and that grant is for $5,000. So you get money that is specifically to a certain purpose. So you have to spend that grant money specifically for a certain activity or fund or fundraiser or something like that. So you get $5,000. Well, you only have one checking account. So you go to the bank, you deposit the $5,000, and now your bank account has $8,000 in it. But some of it is yours and some of it is grant money. So how do you know how much is set aside? Well, there are a number of workarounds, which we'll take a look at, that business type softwares like QuickBooks does in order to kind of compensate for being able to track this kind of stuff. We, however, being a fund accounting software, will allow you to quickly deposit this in such a way to where you can see that my bank is 8, but really within my $8,000 at my bank, I have two balances. I have a general fund balance of $3,000 and a designated fund balance of $5,000. And that can be any number of funds that you need to track. But that's kind of a really basic example of kind of difference there. I use kind of another example verbally. I haven't written it down because it's kind of dumb, but think of your bank account as a pair of pants, right? And the more pockets you have, the more funds that you have. So if you only have one fund, or really in a business standpoint, if you know all the money is kind of shaded the same color, there's no fund activity there, then it's like having one pocket. But as you begin to spend money and put money into it, you might need to know, okay, I have a lot of money in this pocket, but how much is kind of set aside for this other thing? What you really need is 2 pockets or 3 pockets or 4. So fund accounting allows you to create those pockets so that you can still track how much money you have overall between all your pockets, but you can kind of easily designate things between left, right, cargo, whatever, back pocket, so that you can get to individual balances and activity, but still get to the total, if that makes sense. Okay, so difference that makes nonprofit accounting hard. So in business accounting, it's very kind of linear, right? You've got a chart of accounts with assets, liabilities, income, expense, and then your equity kind of being retained earnings, or even in a business standpoint, it's stockholders' equity, that kind of thing. With nonprofits, you don't really have the same type of equity, and really the type of accounting is different because you not only need to know how much money you've received and spent and have and owe, but you need to know that through what Gatsby said is a self-balancing set of accounts. So you need to know, what's my income, what's my expense, what are my asset balances, what are my liability balances for each one of my funds, because each one will have its own, again, self-balancing set of accounts. So it kind of adds dimension. Think of a spreadsheet. If you've got your chart of accounts in the rows, in column A, to where it's all listed from top to bottom, using some sort of business accounting, you really only have one column. So you might have a lot of rows in your chart of accounts, but you only have one column because all of the money kind of gets put into there. Now imagine that you have multiple columns, and the very right column is a total column summing all of the ones before it. With fund accounting, you have, your checking, and then you have, fund A is column A, so you've got $200 there, and then $300 in the next one, and then $500 in the next column, summing to the total. So again, it just adds kind of dimension, and we'll take a look at a number of examples here because me just talking about it's kind of weird, but we'll take a look at how that looks in just a little bit. First, let me stop here for just a second. We're going to do our first poll. So I'm going to launch this thing here right now. It should pop up onto your screen. Ready, set, go. Question is, how familiar are you with fund accounting principles? Select one of the following. First one is not at all. What's fund accounting? A little. I do bookkeeping, but new to fund accounting. Pretty comfortable. I can do the basics. Very comfortable. I use it regularly, and I'm a fund accounting pro. All right, I'm going to give that another 10 seconds or so. All righty. 3, 2, 1, close. All righty. Results, if anybody's curious, is 14% said not at all. What's fund accounting? 40% says a little. I do bookkeeping, but new to fund accounting. 31 says pretty comfortable. I can do the basics. 16% very comfortable. I use it regularly, and 0% for a fund accounting pro. Well, at least it's a self-honest crowd. Appreciate that. And today, again, it's kind of skipping across a lot of things, and a lot of what I'm saying is kind of assuming that there's at least some foundational knowledge of fund accounting here. So if it's a little bit over your head or complicated, or if you want some more follow-up, just let us know, and our support team would be happy to reach out and maybe do a training or something like that for you, or we have some other resources that might be helpful as well. All right. All right, let's get back into it. So difference, business, fund accounting. All right, so nonprofit financial requirements. So nonprofits have to be able to account for tracking your funds, unique nonprofit financial reports. So again, with a self-balancing set of accounts, you then have transactions that hit those accounts. And so you would then theoretically have reports that are specific to that self-balancing set of accounts. So again, think of a fund as its own little mini organization within your larger total, okay? So unique financial reports for each fund. Form 990 reporting, as well as projects, programs, or specific departments. So all of these things are different ways or activities that nonprofits track that having a fund accounting system will be able to accommodate for rather than a business standpoint. So here's an example, probably don't need the slide, but statement of functional expenses. It's one of those reports that typically nonprofits tend to run. You've got kind of a total administrative, but you want to see how much that administrative cost has been spread out across Fund A, B, and C. So having some sort of financial system like that catered to nonprofits and fund accounting would allow you to quickly see what's my total admin expenses, but then how much admin expenses did Fund A have versus Fund B and C, and I want to budget for those specifically and run specific reports, that kind of thing. Alrighty, so tracking your funds correctly is essential for nonprofit reporting. You need a cash balance by fund, income statement by fund, and a balance sheet by fund. So cash balance by fund in QuickBooks. So let me also disclaim that QuickBooks is a fantastic software, absolutely fantastic. They've been around for a while, and there's a reason why they're synonymous with accounting software in the business world. But when it comes to fund accounting, it's just fundamentally different than business accounting, and they don't have a fund accounting system. They have QuickBooks for nonprofits, but all that is just standard business accounting with some nonprofit terms kind of laced in there. So they still don't do fund accounting. So that is just where they fall short a little bit. And working with customers over the years, I've seen a lot of different workarounds that have been implemented in QuickBooks to kind of compensate for the lack of fund accounting. And so let's go through a couple of them. So self-balancing accounts, let's take the cash example again. So again, you have that bank account with $3,000, you add 5 of it from a grant to it, so now you have 8. So you want to be able to see that I have $8,000 in a bank account, but really I have $3,000 for general fund and $5,000 for grant. In a business type software, you would have to set these things up as sub-accounts to your cash account. So you'd have something like the top line there that says 1,000 checking. So that would be your asset account for your checking balance. But then below that, you would then need to create sub-accounts to then hold that money separately. So that's where we've got an example here of general fund, missions fund, grant fund, and expansion fund. So the total amount of my checking account is the bottom sum there of $19,500. Which again would kind of be rolled up to that 1,000 line. But I've now created sub-accounts for the general missions grant and expansion fund. So as money comes in, I can go into my ledger for the general fund checking account and record that I spent $50 at Best Buy. That would then reduce the balance. It would then come out of that, special checking. So my kind of quote unquote fund balance then gets decreased with that expense. So it kind of works from a cash management standpoint. But where this falls short is, first of all, bank reconciliation. So as soon as you get that bank statement for your checking, if you've set up sub-accounts in an accounting system for what really is actually one bank account, doing a bank reconciliation is going to be a nightmare because now you have 4 or however many sub-accounts that you have split up with all of your transactions, and you need to reconcile to one bank statement. I don't know if QuickBooks has a way to kind of consolidate cash accounts and do one kind of global reconciliation. I haven't seen it if it's there, but so doing something like a bank reconciliation is kind of a nightmare. The second thing here, and really kind of the more foundational problem here, is it really only tracks cash balance. So this has nothing to do then with your liabilities, with other types of assets, with any sort of like retained earnings that you have like carried over or anything like that. So really this works from a cash standpoint. So there's that. Now, if typically this workaround here for cash is also kind of coincided with other workarounds, which is this one here. Actually, sorry, this is just another slide to show the cash. So this is just an example back here to where there's a checking. So I'd have to have a checking sub account for general missions, grant, and expansion. And then because I have other cash accounts, I would also need the same 4 sub accounts created for my savings. So there's my second savings account, 1010. And then below that, I've created sub-accounts for general missions, grant, and expansion. Getting to this right here, which is kind of the sum of my cash across the funds. So now I would need to kind of manually work this information out to see how much cash I have available for each fund. So I would need to add 2 different sub-accounts together, 1,000 and 1010.1 for my general stuff. 5,000 plus 7 is 12. and then again with my missions, grant, and expansion fund. So again, this will work for cash balances, but you can already see that it's a ton of work. I need 8 accounts that are not necessary. I need them split between my checking and savings account. And then I need to somehow get to where I can manually sum these amounts to be able to see how much I actually have on hand, ready, liquid, ready to spend for each one of these 4 funds. So with an income statement by fund, so that's cash balance. So then what about activity? So you want to track how much has come in and gone out for something specific. In QuickBooks, they would have these things called classes. And a class is kind of like an extra, it's not in your chart of accounts. It's just kind of this extra like thing, this extra kind of parameter that you can put onto a transaction that then will save to that transaction, and you can run a report then by it specifically. So hypothetically, going back to this example, you could set up classes for general, missions, grant, and expansion. And then Best Buy comes in, you record that I spent $50 out of my general fund sub account to my checking. So it decreases checking. It used office supplies as the expense account. And I've then used the class of my general fund. So now I can get to a report that shows me activity for that general fund class. So I can get to, I don't know if we have a picture of it. We don't. So I can get to an income statement or even a transaction list by a class. So that accomplishes an income statement. The downside, again, kind of the con here, is it doesn't track anything that is not an income or an expense line. So it really kind of stops with in and out activity. So what a class won't allow you to track is fund movements between funds. So let's say you wanted to reallocate general money to missions money and post some sort of transfer there. It wouldn't track that. It also wouldn't track debt. So even between the previous, cash balance workaround and this income statement workaround, you still wouldn't be able to get to a balance sheet by fund because you might have debt. You might have payables or receivables to a particular fund. You can get to what the income is, but kind of an ongoing, how much is owed to me or how much do I owe for this particular fund would be very, very hard to get to. So again, kind of flies in the face of what we mentioned earlier with nonprofits needing kind of quick and accurate access to their information in order to make sound financial decisions. So balance sheet with fund in QuickBooks. So this is what a balance sheet would have to look like, where you've got each kind of main account. So checking, savings, accounts receivable there, credit card, accounts payable, each one of these things that where the account itself would need to have a kind of a subledger for a particular fund, you would have to create the fund subledger there. And then on a report, you'd have to somehow get to where you can kind of pick and choose and create a financial report off of these different subledgers. So kind of goes without saying that, it kind of takes your chart of accounts and requires you to have, 3 or 4 versions of it and all within the same one. So it creates this huge, tremendously long list of accounts that you need to manage. And also just completely overcomplicates things. It makes you create accounts where you really shouldn't have to. So it's all just workarounds. And at the end of the day, getting to a kind of current fund balance, it's going to be really hard because then you might be setting up your equity using unrestricted, temporarily, or permanently restricted, which now would just be donor and non-donor money. You might be able to get to how much you've kind of received and spent in each one of those things. So then you'd have to post some sort of equity adjustment to get the retained earnings the right way for the end of the year. It's just a whole workaround. It's just a big mess. I was going to say something there, but I forgot. It's just a whole big mess. And really, again, it's something that you shouldn't have to be dealing with in the first place. So having something like Aplos or any sort of fund accounting software would allow you to then kind of simplify these things. So let's take a look at what Aplos would look like for these things. Real quick, we're going to do the second poll real quick. I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Poll question is, what do you currently use to manage your organization's bookkeeping? Is it Aplos or QuickBooks or Excel or a bank account or another small business or fund accounting software? Gonna give that another few seconds here. Three, two, one. Okay. All right, so results. What do you currently use to manage your organization's bookkeeping? 11% said Aplos, so welcome, fellow Aplos people. 47% said QuickBooks, all right? 12% Excel or our bank account, 5% another business software, 25% another fund accounting software. Fantastic, great. So I remember what I was going to say. So kind of going back to all these different things here, I can't tell you how many customers that I've got that have come from, doesn't even have to be QuickBooks, just another software where it doesn't allow for fund accounting, and they have their books, which have been, somewhat effectively reconciled, and they have at least somewhat confident ending balances of things, but then they have this separate schedule of spreadsheets that they manage to basically tell them what their fund balances are. So it's almost like their accounting software is kind of the total, but then they have this kind of separate Excel spreadsheet where they've tracked, here are the different funds, and here's come in and come out, and here's what our fund balance should be at the end of the day. And a lot of those people have also gotten that spreadsheet, and the sum of their fund balances exceed the amount of allocable money that they actually have. So again, there's kind of a breakdown too, because not having it in the same system, there's no check and balance for if one thing outweighs the other. So anyways, just a whole big mess there. So let's take a look at Aplos real quick and go through a couple of examples here. Keep working. So this is Aplos. For those of you who have been around Aplos, you know what this looks like. You might have also watched one of our demos at some point. But again, Aplos is an online software. So this is completely web-based. You can access it from anywhere where you've got an internet connection. And for the most part, it works like any other accounting software. Any accounting software is going to make you create a chart of accounts, record transactions, and pull reports. That's the point. You eventually need to pull reports. That's the whole purpose of accounting, is to be able to pull reports so that you can answer financial questions like, how much money do I have? How much have we spent? How much do we, owe? What's the activity been this year? We did a fundraiser. How did that go? All of those questions relate to financial data, which are then built from the transactions that have occurred. And the transactions use the chart of accounts to be able to then eventually break down things in the reports. So it all kind of fits together. So in Aplos, we coach people to do the first thing, which is create your chart of accounts. And again, with anybody, with any accounting software, you're going to do the same things: assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense. The difference in how Aplos manages these things is when you create a fund in Aplos, so you can create a new fund here. I've got a bunch: general, grant, hospital, library, missions. This is a demo account, so there's just all kinds of stuff in here. But any one of these funds, what it does is it creates an equity account down here. Because with nonprofit fund, governmental accounting, you don't have stockholders' equity and retained earnings. You have fund equity at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, you need to be able to see, out of all of our money, how much is set aside for this, that, and the other thing. So this creates a mission or an equity account for each one of the funds that you create, and you can group them. So if you had certain groupings that just make more sense, missions funds or something like that, or this is even how you can group donor designated and non-donor restricted funds together. If your board wants to designate money to something, you can create a fund for it and put that in kind of the unrestricted category. So you create these funds here, it creates equity. And then from there, with every transaction that you enter, you're going to pick the account that's in play, so checking or office supplies or what have you. And then you're also going to pick what fund it's impacting. So let's take a look at an example of that. So in this register area here, I am going to work within my checking account. And then here is where I would enter a new transaction. So here's where I'd put in the date, and then the payee or whatever contact is associated with this transaction, whatever comment I want to put in, the payment or deposit amount, check number if you've got it, and then account. So here's where I'm picking, what account I'm factoring in. So let's take a look here. So let's say that it's today. We'll do Best Buy since I was picking on them earlier. Comment bought supplies, payment of $50. There's no check. I just used a debit card or something. And then I want to type in office supplies or something for my expense account. So here you've now done exactly what you need to do in pretty much any accounting software. How much did you spend? What account did you use? Where was it? When was it? What's the comment? But now Aplos picks up and says, okay, now what fund is this going to come out of? So you're going to pick whichever one you want. So I'm going to pick my, let's just do missions fund. So it's going to come out of my missions fund. So a couple of other things here. We also do accommodate for tagging things to kind of apply to the 990 categories, which is there. And then a tag is equivalent to a QuickBooks class. So if you have something that you want to track outside of your chart of accounts and outside of a fund, like a project or a department or a ministry or a fundraiser or a missions trip, any one of those kind of like extra things that don't really hold balances going forward, they're just more of like activity trackers or kind of profit things that you want to track throughout the year, you can create tags or classes for those to track as well. So I've got this transaction, I'm going to save it. That then gets saved to my ledger here. It moves my cash balance down. It shows that I spent office supplies money here. But then if I scroll down to the bottom, it's also going to show me this bar graph. Now what this bar graph shows is my current balance is $903,000. We are super rich here, $903,000. Scroll down. And that $903,000 is actually comprised of individual fund balances within my checking account. So this automatically does away with the need for those kind of sub accounts within checking, because you've got one checking account and we just maintain individual fund balances within it. So out of the 903,000, I can scroll down here and I can see that my general fund holds the majority of that. So it's 852,000. My grant fund has a balance within my checking account of $13,500, which means in my checking account, I can go make $13,500 worth of purchases for grant-related activity, because that's how much money I have on hand in my checking account right now for that fund. My missions fund, where that expense came out of, is now $98,29.77. So before that, it was $50 higher, and so on and so forth. So with every transaction that you enter in Aplos, you're again not only picking what accounts are in play, but you're picking what fund it impacts, right? So now that results in, you've got your chart of accounts set up. You've also got your transactions entered. So now let's go take a look at how that would look on a report. So in Aplos, you have your standard balance sheet and income statement, or statement of financial activities and statement of financial position reports. Those are just the boilerplate, income statement and balance sheet. There's a number of other kind of budget and comparative reports you can run, but any one of those reports can also be run by fund. So let's take a look at my income statement by, I'm going to do a comparative income statement. Where is that? Comparative income statement by fund. So what this is going to show me is for the month. Let's just do this month. I'm going to add all of my funds in here. So this is going to be kind of cumbersome, but you'll see what it looks like here. And then I'm going to add my total column in here as well. So here is the report now. So what this is showing is, again, from top to bottom, it's showing me all of my income and expense accounts. I only have this one transaction entered in for the month, so that's why it's only showing this. You can also show, inactive or zero balance accounts as well. But then from left to right, what this is showing me is a fund column for each one of my funds. So that expense that I entered for $50 to my missions fund shows up in office supplies. So not office supplies dash missions dash general dash whatever. It's just office supplies. And $50 of its total is attributed to my missions fund. If I had, $50 in each one of these columns, then over here on the right, my total would be the sum of all of the fund activity within that one expense account. And then down here at the bottom, something that nonprofits need to see almost all the time is what was my beginning fund balance, what has been my net income or loss for this period that I'm looking at, and then what has been the other fund balance movements. So this is like equity transfers, or if you've paid off debt or something, the principal of debt doesn't hit expense, but it decreases your fund balance. So that kind of stuff would show up there. And then what's my ending fund balance as of this day. So all of this information here is, again, kind of built off of having the right set of chart of accounts, the right type of fund accounting, being able to enter transactions for funds so that you can quickly get to, all right, what's my total income statement, but then what's an income statement by fund, kind of from left to right. And we have different ways of seeing this. This one is what we call a comparative report, so where it shows the total on the right, but then from left to right is all of the different fund columns. I like it because it's just a big, huge Excel grid kind of snapshot of everything. You can also do a income statement by fund, to where each fund then has its own income statement, so its own income, expense, and everything. So it's not a column; it's like separate pages. So if I were to go to the missions fund here, There's my income statement for just my missions fund, and then you can filter down to the funds you want to see. We also just have the standard income statement. So if you wanted something that is not separated out or by fund, you just wanted a big, just what's my income statement, you can run that. And again, there's no kind of fund monikers or anything. It's just the total amounts for each income and expense. So another thing that Aplos does is you entered that transaction for Best Buy. So we tracked activity, we tracked the fund that it was coming out of. So we got to a fund income statement really easily. But we also spent money out of the checking account, which had a fund balance. So now what does my balance sheet by fund look like? So you can do the same thing. In Aplos, you can go to the balance sheet, which just shows here's my total balance sheet, not designated by fund. At the very bottom of your balance sheet, it will show what each fund overall balance is, which is because it's your equity. So all of your equity is factored in here. But the other report that I like here is the comparative balance sheet by fund. And I like it, again, because I'm an accountant and this kind of grid format makes sense to me. But usually this is the report that I show people that really kind of illustrates what is happening with a fund here. So same kind of theory behind the balance sheet here is the income statement, where on the total is the right. So the total for my checking account as of today is that value right there. We were working in that 50-50 checking account, so there's that 902,000. But that is actually made up of all of these individual fund balances within that checking account. So it is completely possible to have a general fund balance, as you can see here, in all of the different accounts. And in fact, the total fund balance down here in the equity section, my overall fund balance for my general fund is $1.1 million and change. That's made up of liability balances, asset balances, fixed asset, cash balances. Basically, if you were to just take, let's just filter it down here. If you were to just take the general fund and make it one thing here, it's got its own balance sheet. So it's a self-balancing set of accounts. It's got its own assets, liabilities, and equity balance. So you can get to what's my overall fund balance. So how is that equity made up of the debt and the assets that are attributed to that particular fund? And all of which kind of, again, sum up to the total here. So if I were to re-engage all of the funds here, along with the total, you can get to what's the total, and then how's that total built up of the different fund balances in between. I use this constantly for customers because they typically come to me and say, hey, I have a fund balance that doesn't match my cash balance. Why is that? Or, my fund balance is kind of out of whack. Why is it so much different than what it says that I have cash on hand? Well, again, your fund balance is a sum of your assets minus your liabilities. So if you are just looking at this bank account and thinking that is my overall fund balance, well, you're not factoring in the other bank accounts in play or any fixed assets or any debt attributed to that fund. So really the snapshot is this whole column here, not just the cash balance. So anyway, so this report just kind of helps illustrate what are all the balances in play in my balance sheet. All right. So that is the income statement and balance sheet by fund in Aplos. Again, kind of boiling down, it all kind of starts with the structural integrity of being able to have a chart of accounts that is designed for fund accounting, being able to enter transactions in a fund accounting manner, so being able to track what funds are in play with every single dollar that moves through your organization, and then eventually being able to pull reports that are applicable to that data. All right, let's do our last poll real quick, and then we'll finish off the presentation. So launch poll here. All right, so are you considering a new accounting software? Yes, very soon, maybe, not right now, or later. Okay, a couple more seconds there. 3, 2, and 1. All right, so are you considering a new accounting software? 20% yes, very soon. 15% maybe in the next couple of months. 22% I would like to, but can't right now. And 43% not right now. Great. If you want more information on Aplos, again, feel free to reach out to us. We can have someone give you some more information or work through a demo with you. Or, down the road, if you want to re-explore, feel free. Alrighty, so we looked a little bit at Aplos. So there's, again, kind of screenshot versions of what we just did. So there's the register, being able to enter transactions and see a fund balance chart at the bottom of each cash account or each account in play. You can get to comparative income statement and balance sheet by fund. You can get to individual income statements and balance sheets by fund, or you can go to the overall total. Very easy to do. You can also share information. So you can, once you have this, you can easily share it with your board or save a report for later or customize it. There's a number of filters and different things that you can do to kind of get down to the exact data that you need. And then we also have, like I said, we call them tags, but really they're equivalent to a QuickBooks class, which is just kind of an extra parameter. So we can allow you to track things that are outside of your chart of accounts and outside of a fund, like locations. So like a multi-site church or something, you would have multiple locations. Departments, you might have different ministries or departments functioning to where you want to budget specifically and allow people to have access to log in and see their reports for their specific department or something. We can allow for that. Projects, missions trips, fundraisers, really anything. Again, they don't carry balances. So what I typically say is all of these tags and classes and things are temporal. They have a term, they're either for a specific day or a week or a month or a year or something. So this would help you track what has come in and gone out for this thing. But again, what's coming in and going out is still kind of within the bucket of a larger fund. You just want to be able to drill into a little bit more specific data on, I might have a missions trip fund, but I might go to Kenya and South America and New York all, throughout the year. So I want to track how much has come in and gone out for each one of those three things, but they're all still within the missions total. So that's just kind of an example there. Alrighty, so I have talked quite a bit. We've gone through a lot of data, and we're here to help. So we have award-winning support. We are more than happy to answer any questions. We always sit in a line like that against a wall, smiling constantly. That is exactly how we look at every moment of the day. But really, all of our support is free, and all of our support representatives have been trained in not only fund accounting, but also our software. So we can help with almost anything that you need. Just as a disclaimer, we're not CPAs and we're not like by trade accountants. So we will defer to more professional people if there's something outside of our expertise. But if it comes to getting set up, entering transactions, using a software, some basic questions, just overall management of a nonprofit or a church, we can certainly provide some help there. And we have a number of references if you ever want to talk to somebody. But for now, let's go to kind of an open Q&A session here. So we've got about 14 minutes left in our session. I do notice that I've seen some questions come through. So I'm going to pause for just a second here and kind of filter through here and see what needs to be answered. If you have questions, feel free to submit those, and I will do my best to answer everything. Be right back. Okay, got some questions here. I'm going to move over to the software in case I need to show something over there. Okay. I saw a number of people say that the audio was cutting in and out. I'm sorry about that. If you weren't there for it, I kind of gave a disclaimer at the beginning that our internet connection was kind of fussy. And in fact, about 5 minutes into our presentation, there's a couple of people in front of my window kind of giving me like a uh-oh kind of face. So hopefully it came back and you were able to hear me. If not, it's being recorded. And I hope that the recording is like local, so it doesn't have anything to do with internet. But yeah, either way, we will share this presentation with you guys. So if you want to watch it later, you're welcome to. And we can also provide the slide deck if you want that. And again, even if you have questions or want to go through something specifically, always feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to follow up offline later. All right. Okay, so first question I see here is is this the highest level of Aplos? I see that there are 3 different levels we can purchase. Yeah, I think, let's see, I think I have I just have kind of this demo account that I'm using here is not the highest level. Really what the difference is we have, in the accounting side of us, we have accounting and donor management side. In the accounting side, we have kind of technically 4 options. One is just all I need is accounting and basic accounting. So there's no fixed assets, there's no allocations, there's no reoccurring transactions. It's just very kind of basic general ledger, register, basic functions. The tier up from that is the same accounting, but then we add some contributions management in there as well. So if you need to track who gave and how much and give them a statement at the end of the year, that's what we call our standard package. From there, it goes to advanced, and advanced adds the ability to budget by fund. It adds multiple classes or tags rather. So instead of just having one kind of category of tag, you can have 4. And it also adds recurring transactions and the ability to assign people specific access to, funds and tags. And then the fourth layer, the highest one, the total, has all of the previous and then also includes allocations and fixed assets. And if you're curious in one of those higher levels and you already use Aplos, or if you don't, either way, we can set you up with one of our sales reps and they can go through a demo and show you what those entail. Let's see, how well does Aplos integrate with electronic giving platforms? We have one kind of native in-house that we work with called WePay. So you can set up an online account with WePay and then set up donation forms through Aplos to be able to publish to your website and start receiving money. If you already use something, then we have a couple of integrations. I don't know if they are specific to the receiving platforms, but like we have integrations with Church Community Builder, CCB, Bloomerang, PayPal. So if you currently use one of those systems, we potentially have an integration that can help kind of port that stuff in. Otherwise, we have one in-house that you're welcome to use as well. Can the system help us track invoices and due dates? Yep. Any level of Aplos includes accounts receivable and accounts payable. So you can use that to track who do I owe or who owes me and when, and then when's it due and what's the aging, all that kind of stuff. You can easily track with Aplos. Do you have a way to capture and record pledge payments made in advance of the year? That's a good question. We do have a pledge tracking software, but I have not tested it specifically for if something has been received in advance. I would assume that you can track the pledge and track when it's received. And then if you do, like if you receive a pledge or a donation that is kind of earmarked for the following year, you would just want to make sure that you've recorded that to show that it's temporarily or donor restricted for that term until it is kind of released. And then you can do a fund transfer to make it released so that way you can spend it.